one of the best ways to reinforce the deterrent to Russia is to make sure that nothing is ever taken off the table. And if necessary, we give Ukraine the tools to finish the job to win.
Now then, Ukraine is really taking the fight to Russia. We've just seen one of the largest drone attacks on Moscow. There's strong suspicions Ukraine is behind a cyber attack on Russian public services. And there's a report this morning that Ukraine has used American-built rockets on bridges in Kursk. Should we welcome these new fronts in the war or worry about the risk escalation will bring? Well, Sir Ben Wallace is the former Defence Secretary, and it's interesting as well because General Sir Patrick Sanders, who stood down as Chief of the General Staff this summer, has issued a rallying cry to allies of Ukraine. He dismissed Western nervousness about escalation, concerns about Russian use of a tactical nuclear weapon. Sir Ben, you're very welcome to Times Radio Breakfast. I wonder what your thoughts are on General Sir Patrick Sanders' comments.
Good morning, Peter. Look, I think overall Patrick Sanders is saying what many of us have always believed and agreed, which is one of the best ways to reinforce the deterrent to Russia is to make sure that nothing is ever taken off the table. And if necessary, we give Ukraine the tools to finish the job to win, not to be static, not to have to just have more frozen conflict, but to give Ukraine the tools that they need in order to expel Russia from parts of their country or all of their country if possible. Instead of sort of salami slicing those sort of permissions or indeed those supplies. You know, at the very, very beginning of this, it actually, I think it is this weekend or last, certainly this month is the annual anniversary of Ukraine's foundation or freedom since the Soviet Union. And I remember when I was invited, even way before the invasion, the Foreign Office advice was, oh, well, I wouldn't be going to that. That might provoke Putin just to go there. And then, of course, the short-range anti-tank missiles. We've had the provocation line and the escalation line for 2.5 years now. And that is being used as an excuse often to not do something. But it's perfectly right to give Ukraine the tools to finish the job within the international laws we have. And they are allowed, therefore, for example, to strike into Russia in accordance with articles of the UN if those sites are prosecuting in the illegal invasion.
Within the shifting sands of Western politics, what is your assessment of how enthusiastic both Britain under Labour and America, certainly we've seen in the last number of months, Congress has taken its time in making a decision about supporting Ukraine? We may well move into a phase where things are different under either President Harris or President Trump. I just wonder what you think about what's happening now, the changes since Labour has come in, and about the next few months.
Well, look, in defence of Labour's mission on Ukraine, it hasn't changed. It has given it a longer commitment. I think at NATO they talked about as long as it takes, and a commitment to £3 billion. So I don't recognise the characterisation by President Zelensky that Britain's support has slowed down. And actually, other countries, remember, are stepping up. The F-16s from, I think, Denmark and the Netherlands are now either going in or have gone in or will be going in. Obviously, America is more unpredictable than ever. It's an election year. The battle lines were drawn over the last donations, but a lot of that was actually, and our media doesn't always report that, a lot of the hesitation in the United States is actually linked to domestic politics. It's sort of, it's a hostage to fortune, you know, that if you don't do something about the border with Mexico, we won't let your foreign policy progress with regards to Ukraine. And that was actually the main front that united Republicans. So I don't think it's slowing down, but I do think there are still those voices who warn of escalation. And I think my view would be they have been around a long time. Putin remembers escalation options are massively declining anyhow. Let's not forget he invaded with 165,000 troops. He's lost double that, injured or killed. So he's actually lost the army that invaded, in a sense. The amount of weaponry they're now deploying is so old. Some of them were decommissioned in the 1970s. So his options to escalate, I mean, what is he going to invade, let's say, the Scandinavians with if he wanted to? He has very little left. Now, I don't know if he's told the truth about exactly what he's got left, but it doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be blasé. We should always listen to the concern of escalation. In my 10-year time, I was very, very calibrated. I would make sure that if Russia started, for example, bombing civilian areas, as they did, that's when I said, right, we're going to tell the DA that was then in London, the Russian GRU officer, that we will be doing this in response to their bombing of civilian areas. In other words, for every response by Russia, we would take a response that would measure it. So they got anti-aircraft missiles. When they continue to start bombing and using the Russian drones, the Iranian drones and things against rather random targets, it was easier to make the case to my European colleagues in America that Storm Shadow should be allowed to be used in Crimea. It was absolutely the right thing to do. Russia can't sit behind certain fake red lines and pretend that no one's going to come for them if they are actually killing hundreds of civilians every day and Ukrainian troops in an illegal operation.
And Ben, this isn't just a war about weapons, as you were saying there. We're hearing reports of mass disruption in messaging apps such as Telegram, WhatsApp in Russia as well. How much of a part do you think these strategies that affect communications and actually drone strikes, for that matter, play in contemporary warfare and play in this particular war?
Well, I think that's one of the lessons of the Ukrainian conflict is that, you better have good electronic warfare and good signals intelligence and a good cyber offensive capability. And in the past, I've often been publicly critical that if push comes to the shove on budgets, our services would always buy, new for old. They'd replace one big ship with another big ship. When actually, if you look at the destruction on the Black Sea of the Russian fleet, those are not inflicted by a navy of Ukraine. In fact, Ukraine doesn't really have a navy. They're inflicted by small drones that cost only tens of thousands of dollars on the surface. And I think, woe betide any Western NATO power that doesn't listen to the lessons coming out of Ukraine. You need electronic warfare to jam the simplest drones. You need electronic warfare to disrupt your enemy's communications. If they can't talk to each other on the radio, they can suddenly be pretty blind. And I used to make the point, as did General Sir Nick Carter at the time when he was the CDS for my first part of my tenure, that we spend billions of finding the enemy, ISR, AWACS and all that sort of stuff. But how much do we actually spend on hiding ourselves? Much of that is done with electronic warfare. It's a tiny amount. It's a complete imbalance. And the new battlefield has exposed that.
Your sense clearly is that Ukraine is winning this war. They're making major gains. They've incursion into Russian territory. I just wonder, what do you think peace looks like and when does it come?
Well, I think what I'd say is Ukraine can win the war if we continue to send strong messages, as did Patrick Saunders say to Russia, that we will do what we need as the international community to support an ally being illegally invaded. We will supply what we need. And as the Labour government said, for as long as it takes, we will continue to do that. That's the first message that Putin needs to hear. And the second message is he needs to see a united front internationally, because he's banking on really two things. And that's been in the last year. He's got nothing else to hang on to. He's banking that we're all flake away. And then he's also banking that we worry more, quite rightly, we worry about the troops that we all have and the Ukrainian people worry about their citizenship, whereas he clearly doesn't. He's quite happy to throw another 100,000 men to die, randomly in poor acts of military leadership. And those two are his calculations. So I think the key here is to send constantly an international message to him that we're not going anywhere, that we will continue to fund it. And that's really important. But at the same time, there are still questions, that President Zelensky has to face every day as the leader of the country. Does he mobilize his population is a big question for him. He's to date not done that, while Russia has secretly really mobilized all its population, except the elite in St. Petersburg and Moscow and UAE and Cyprus, where they're all living, all the children of the middle class and the rich are hiding away of Russia. But, it depends who wants to take those steps. Does Ukraine want to mobilize like Britain did in 1939 and 1941 in the Women at War Act in 41, or does it want to maintain this level of pressure? It's been successful so far in its Kursk incursion, but we are still to see significant Russian troop movements, which would have been one of the objectives of that invasion. Will it pull away troops from other parts of the front line. We've seen a few thousand, but for that intervention to be successful, I think Zelensky, who's managed to change the narrative with it, he's changed international views towards Ukraine with it. But let's see if on the battlefield we see less Russian equipment elsewhere as a result of it.
Okay, Sir Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary, thank you for joining us on Times Radio Breakfast.
And inside the Times this morning, you can read George Grills, the defence correspondent, writing up Zelensky's sort of plea. You were talking about it there, Peter, but Zelensky pointed to that the incursion that's been so successful over the last couple of weeks as proof that Russia's red lines are illusory, and appealed directly to the leaders here in Britain, France, the US, Germany to approve the use of these long-range missiles. It's a fascinating read, just for a bit more context about what weapons are being used where and the risk profile associated with them.